And they're saying, well, I mean, our IT guys just left to work for some new startup company, and we can't actually incorporate some of the things we'd like to. And so the labor market very much is it can be a driver, but it can also be a constraint on the speed at which this goes through the economy. I think that just because a lot of these IT skills are in relatively short supply, that is probably going to put a brake on how rapidly we see some of these things adopted. The other thing, though, of course, the other direction, of course, as other panelists have stressed, it does potentially have a big effect on the labor market, but I think often in pretty subtle ways. And we've seen previous waves of technology which have created more jobs than they've destroyed. I mean, one example is when ATMs came in the banking industry, and there, of course, bank tellers. I mean, the prediction would be, well, now you don't need bank tellers to count out all that money for people, and so there aren't going to be as many jobs in banking. But in fact, the opposite happened, because the tellers weren't dispensing cash; they were doing all kinds of other stuff, selling other financial services, and the skills that were required were actually quite different. There was less a sort of the skills involved in accurately counting banknotes and all that sort of stuff, but it was more the sort of interpersonal skills and so on. And that comes, of course, to the educational requirements. It's not just about, we need lots more people who can write code, but it's actually a lot of other things. And to some extent, I think it's the fact we need the educational system to promote the kind of versatility that means that people can actually adapt and learn new things, not just train for one occupation, but actually be prepared for a world where they may have to change occupations throughout their lifetime. And I think the other thing is that it's going to be a hugely increased emphasis on lifelong learning, and I think to avoid precisely the outcome and we're very much, I very much sympathize with the points that Sunil made, the sense that this could be a driver of huge inequality. You could have people marginalized and displaced, and to avoid that outcome, we really need to ensure that that people can adapt as life goes on, and that doesn't mean necessarily going from being truck drivers to being IT specialists, but it means actually finding a whole range of other occupations that actually can make very good use of their skills, and that those could be either white or blue collar jobs.
So I'm going to go to Steve now, and then Fawad.
Don't you forget me, dude.
You're there.
I'm coming.
I know you are. I'm just working up to you.
I know.
I'll be quick. Just 2 points. In response to some of the discussion first, and as you raised with ATMs, that's the classic example. I mean, we're sitting in a bank vault now. I think you can think about this used to be a bank with a hub of people coming in and out, and technology changed that, and now people like Rodney in the financial services sector have jobs. Like it's shifted it, and it's created this huge payments sector where people are innovating, and yeah, their jobs are going to shift, and there's we don't have lamplighters anymore. Things change, but new jobs are created. And I think there's very valid questions about what are those types of jobs. And, we offer all sorts of jobs with Amazon. You can work in a fulfillment center. You can work at a development center. It's pretty wide ranging. Just quickly on the retail side, what some people don't realize is if you go on Amazon, about half the stuff that you see is not being sold by Amazon. Being sold by what we call our third-party sellers. And these are largely small businesses who use Amazon or might use other online stores to sell their stuff. And so they're reaching a broader audience of customers. They're able to sell anywhere in the world. They're able to export. It's a shift. What's going to happen to brick and mortar retail? I think there's always a role for that to play, and it'll always be there, but it is kind of shifting how it works. But you can be a Canadian small business in rural Ontario, and you can ship to customers throughout Canada, throughout the US, throughout the world. So I think it's just looking at it that way. Technology is enabling more jobs, creating more commerce that way.
Yeah, I'll just add to that briefly. I think we're in a situation where our federal government is putting diversity and Indigenous peoples front and center. For many Indigenous peoples, just don't want to leave their communities, which is reasonable, to enter the labor market. It's those kinds of platforms that allow them to do that. So, Fawad, if I could.
Just building on the point around how jobs are changing, when we talk to boards and executive suites, the biggest role that they're looking for, you can call it all kinds of things, is a translator. Somebody who gets both sides of the fence, who understands the business as well as the technology. I mean, that's just thinking today, going beyond the developers, the architects, etc. But if we just go further out a few years from now, and we think about leadership and what competencies we look for, just as an example, empathy is one of the things that we look for, in leaders. And I asked my Uber driver or Lyft, how does it feel that an app is controlling your day-to-day? And they're like, well, over the years, we teach empathy to our supervisors. We say, we think that's an important aspect of it. But technology somewhat removes it. So if you think about future roles, maybe there's going to be an empathy auditor to see if an organization has enough of empathy as part of their leadership suite. And so just, there are roles that we haven't even imagined, that are going to come up, as we move forward.
So Manny, it's time for you to rock. One thing I would like at the tail end or whatever is, why can't we get more women involved? And but that may not be where you want to start, but if that's something if you could add on to that, to your comments, that'd be great.
Well, I just think it's amazing when you put a group of us up here on these very uncomfortable chairs and see what happens. I don't know. I can see you breathing it out, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my belt here in a second. But I think it's very interesting that you hear key words come out of the panel out here, and you see different, I think different perspectives come out because we're all in different areas of the economy. And I love the data collection, and I love the policy and ethics. And and then we're talking about, what the hell was his name again? Winston? Whatever. And then we talk about empathy, and you look at the industry that I'm in, and I'm going to touch on the women in a minute, is that you look at someone like me, is that at the end of the day, and then we're going to talk about efficiency, my young man, is that at the end of the day, right now, what people don't really understand is that we have not just a tiny, but a systemic skilled trade shortage in Canada and throughout the world. It's systemic. When you look at your biggest financial ability to make money, hold on to ability, and maybe even retire is in your home in Canada, who are you going to call? You need to buckle up, Buttercup, because it's going to get a lot worse. And I'll tell you why. When we talk about potential in human beings, we've missed that. We've gone right to AI. To your point, my love, efficiencies, there are things that human beings truly are not picking up on. Why? Because we're emotional. We have children. We have sick parents. We have things going on, and we miss things. It's a coat check, is what it is. And so my point here is when we're talking about women, when I talk to people around North America, I look at the boys and I say, I love you, man, but listen up. The issue is that most women put in a half a day before they even go out the front door, whether it be physical, emotional, you name it. And so you ask yourself, why would a woman want to come into the skilled trade industry when she's already tired? And so this is the issue, is that I built this company with 60% of my company being women. And I haven't hired them because I'm trying to check a box. I've hired them because they make me money. Because they're amazing. But what do? I bring out their potential. Because they're able to do most things that most human beings, and I can tell you that robots, will never do. And so the point is that what I do, my love, is I show up with items that prove to be efficient on their bodies, their minds, and the progression of an industry that's never allowed them in the front door. And so for that, I look at everybody around here and I say, let's help each other, because let's stop stop going to the top of the mountain and let's just camp in the side and eat beans and drink beer for a while and figure out what we're doing before we go up there. Because we have a whole group. You talk about the truck drivers? There's something to be said for sophistication in human beings that a computer will never pick up on. I've watched it, I've seen it. I looked at these kids today and I said, listen, other than you being almost buck naked, sitting on a cloud, everything that you walk on, everything that you talk on, everything that you eat, everything that you soap your body with, everything that wipes the soap off your body was made by the blue-collar industry. Everything that you wear, everything that you talk in, everything the guy that's filming us right now are people that are in this industry that absolutely cultivate how we live every day. But is anybody talking about that? No. They're second-class citizens. AI is cool. Robots are cool. I'm fighting this because I'm telling you that companies like mine, people like Mandy Renahan, more of us need to be in the industries that are not transparent, that rip off consumers. Why? Because they've been allowed to. Can I replace those people that rip you off in your home? I can't, my sweet, because there's nobody to replace them. So I'm saying that let's, before we go to C, how about we go back to A for a little bit and work together? Because I'm telling you right now that a company like mine turned away almost $20 million in the last 2 years in work because I didn't have the people. And so I'm saying the education and training is what we need to give to human beings before we put it into somebody who doesn't give a shit, which would be Jeremy. Exactly. Woo!
Excellent. Well put. Well put.
I told you to come back to me. I'm ready.
All right. So we're going to go to the audience now, and go for a little Q&A. I see a gentleman in the back.
Question, I guess it's kind of a compound question, a bit to Steve, who mentioned about the lack of engineers in the AI field, and I kind of want to counter that to almost maybe there's too many, and maybe a need of like psychologists, anthropologists, sociologists, educators, artists even, and that kind of communication, because this idea of artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence, purely being from a space that, still is predominantly male, still like, a cost to like, affording to be able to become an engineer. There's just so much else from the world that kind of needs to go into that field. I mean, look at like, what was Microsoft's Titania AI bot, and just like, or like even the algorithms that kind of dictate, YouTube recommendations. Like if there was more, actual knowledge of, and these skills that are still out there and still useful going into this field that is almost in a way trying to get rid of those fields, maybe it would be more of a benefit to us all. And so the other kind of flip side of that is the worry that maybe, the rise of AI and all this may create this kind of useless class of people who either don't want to learn how to code or be a part of that AI field, or just can't. I don't know who to direct that to exactly. Go.
I think you raised some excellent points, and yeah, not mutually exclusive things that we do need engineers to compete in the future of work. But you also need people who have these social skills and empathy. And I mean, I'm a political science major, so but I also did some coding when I was little. And I think that's kind of how I look at it. When we're talking about K to 12, we want to introduce it. We think that every student should have a core set of computer science skills. And then you will see more that go on to become engineers or in related field. But even the psychology majors and the artists, I think they need to have that background, because if you're going to be a psychology major that's going to be working with AI companies or technology companies, you need to have an understanding of how that works. So I think there's just like we all have a baseline in math and history and chemistry, like I think we all need to have a baseline in CS going forward. And I mean, Amazon hires all sorts of people. Most of them, I mean, the biggest clump is going to be engineers, but there's just about a job for everyone at Amazon, depending on what your background is. And it's a very diverse place where we do have that same idea that we want to bring people together that come from different backgrounds. And you often get people who are engineers that have a degree or strong interest in the field that you mentioned.
I would rather people learn Latin or Greek than computer science in school, quite honestly. I mean, computer programming is going to be very easy to automate in 5 to 10 years. I'm not saying we shouldn't expose kids to it. It's not, obviously it's going to be important, but if Canada's doubling down on, we're going to train kids in computer science, again, China and India are going to produce more tertiary grads, so university grads, than we have Canadians, period, per year, every single year. So if we think we're going to compete with them on computer science on a numbers game, we're not. I would much rather we give people broad-based approaches to education. We teach them how to fail, we teach them adaptability, we teach them empathy. And hey, great, a little computer science is great, but if we're kind of focusing that on that as the silver bullet that's going to rescue us, then I think we're in a huge amount of trouble.
Resilience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Yeah, sure you were.
Anybody else want to tackle that one? No. Any other questions?
Oh, lots.
My job didn't exist when I was in high school. I'm in the technology field. My son came to me, 16, said, "What should I do when I grow up? I want to be successful." And I said, "My job didn't exist. I don't know what your job is going to be. Do everything, be everything." And he goes, "Well, if you were to crystal ball it, what would it be?" And I said, "Electrician." And he looked at me, "What the hell are you talking about?" I said, "What do you think's running all of this stuff? Become an electrician, become a plumber. You want to really do something different? Become an electrical engineer. Whatever it may be, because all of this infrastructure needs something, and that's something that Ontario is lagging behind. Our infrastructure costs are through the roof. It's going to Quebec." So from a Canadian perspective, we're getting stuff because Quebec's got great hydro rates, but we don't have it in Ontario. Canada, lousy mobile rates. 50% of the internet is now mobile, and we have some of the worst OECD numbers on mobile. So we have a lot of things to improve for my son to be a successful electrician, and he will probably enjoy that. What it came back to was you talked about computer science, and there's a gap right now. 16, can't get a job. Why? He's been automated out of a job. That teller at McDonald's is now automated. He can't get even the most basic, no qualifications job, and that's across the board for kids in high school before they go to university or college or whatever the case may be. That is a real problem for our sector, for Canada. It's the first part to it. The second part is life skills are now missing. Kids don't understand basic life skills because it's not as important. Handwriting isn't as important as computer science. I'm computer science. But they've stopped teaching how to do cursory handwriting. What does that mean? They lose their motor skills. What does that mean? They can't actually do things with their hands anymore in the same ways, because something that was just cute earlier on, cursory, actually helps define them as they grow up. These life skills are critical. And we have to keep that in mind when we're looking at technology, that we're not eroding some basic functions.
Yeah.
Great point.
Beans and beer.
Great point. It reminds me of a report that came out this week about surgeons in Europe sort of sounding the alarm about students not being able to use their hands anymore. Students not being able to use their hands anymore, as a surgeon could. Yes, sir.
Yes. I'd like to get a sense of what you think is happening from an organizational perspective around the evolution of the manager, sort of the command and control type traditional management role to more of a coaching type evolution as we address these issues that you've raised, which I think are very significant, about having people being adaptable and flexible, and who's going to facilitate with that within the organization. And I know there seems to be this push now that the CHRO is going to be much more important than they have been in past. The triumvirate will be the CIO, the CEO, and the CHRO. And I'm wondering what your feeling about that. Is that actually happening, and are organizations starting to recognize managers in a different role than traditionally?
It's a fantastic question.
Certainly. So you raised a really good point around the CHROs. We're seeing that more and more. Even in my prior career, which was in management consulting, I started seeing, when we did mergers and acquisitions, we'd see the CHRO at the table with the CFO and the CEO, which was kind of new. Typically, the CHROs are in back of the office, because people integration is becoming more and more important than the technology in itself. And as we move forward, if you look at the Amazon, the Apple, the Google, it's not their technology that's expensive. It's the people that are very expensive. And I fail to recall whether it was Google or Facebook that said, pay people unfairly. If someone is creating 10x the value, you got to pay them 10x the value, because if they leave, you lose that amount of value. You got to pay them that way. So there's the way management used to think. If you think about Jack Welch and the psychology of the performance measurement and this ginormous company, that's going away. We're seeing more and more of pods and letting people incubate elements, and all of that creates a lot of complexity in running an organization, which makes the CHRO role way more important than it was in the past.
Regan?
I would just add from our perspective, so I lead a national team, people work across the country, and IBM was one of the first companies to have remote work. People work from home, and now it's kind of a thing people accept as a sort of minimum standard. And we did the work from home thing like in the 90s. Somebody talked about pensions. IBM got rid of its defined pension plan in 1992. So we've been at the forefront of doing these kinds of things. But we can work from home, so it's good. But we're actually in Canada on a push now to bring people back to the office, because we have found as leaders, and I love the term coaching because it's actually what we use internally. We talk about leading and coaching. We don't talk about managing, and vernacular is actually really important. So we're bringing more people back to the office, even if technologists are working with folks in India, and we have a big chunk of our employees are based in India. We want them in the office working with their colleagues, because there's a secret sauce that you lose when everybody's remote. So from a coaching perspective, those are some of the steps that we're taking is to bring people back. Obviously flexible work arrangements and all the rest of that stuff we continue to do. I think the other point that I wanted to make is actually in reference to Hillary's role as the Chief Digital Officer. I think you're starting to see organizations, that's for Ontario, but lots of organizations are defining specific leadership roles, and from that platform, hopefully those leaders are drawing it back to people. So the digital discussion you talked about earlier, which the users first, or think like a user. I'm not sure what the button says. I can't see it from here, but that focus actually is permeated right across the C-suite of any organization: marketing, digital, HR, even finance. And so I think as organizations evolve, if you think about org structure, it's from the military actually is how organizations historically have gotten their structure. So I don't think that's going away, but the focus and the empowerment of leaders at the top of organizations to then manage down and coach down is something that we see, at least in our organization, that really is putting people first, and there's an evolution of that conversation.
Can I just throw out, I have joked that, I guess it's a joke, but I've joked that instead of Chief Digital Officer, my role really should be Chief Empathy Officer.
Yeah.
And that really is half of my role when it comes to digital transformation, when it comes to how I interact with my peers and other senior leaders across the organization. That is my job.
Empathy and diplomacy.
That's right.
Right?
chief digital officer is the chief diplomat, and we see that in clients all the time, where we're doing transformational projects, whether it's public sector or the private sector, where the folks who are impacted by whether it's an HR transformation or something else, the people component, empathy, diplomacy is a big part of that. But management and the structure of management has evolved, and the roles have been created. I mean, years ago, the idea of a chief digital officer wouldn't have existed, but it does now through technology, and that person in smart organizations has a stake at the table that will help the organization move along in their own journey.
All right, so we got 2 more questions. There's, I think, alcohol, so I don't want to hold anybody back from that, and it's cold and we're Canadian.
Do I have one?
Yes.
May I?
Hey.
Afternoon, and I want to thank, because you guys were outstanding tonight. Outstanding job you guys did. It's kind of directed more at Timothy Lane.
Yeah.
Only because you're part of the Bank of Canada, so there's a lot of you guys up here that are part of the government, which is great, and it's fantastic. And all of your opinions are very important. But how does the Bank of Canada move forward with AI, which is what I think is a very important part? Okay, with society and cryptocurrency, and like there's a lot of those gray areas that we don't understand, that we would like an opinion on. And how do we as Canadians become part of that AI group, right? So as being part of the world with respect to going forward, and how does that integrate with all of our everyday life? You know, just simplifying it.
Okay, well, thanks for that question. I mean, obviously, there are 2 pieces of it. One piece is really, as part of our responsibility to keep the Canadian economy on an even keel. We have to understand the forces that are driving economic growth in Canada, and AI, along with all these other technological changes, are very important in that process. And we're not seeing them in the numbers yet, but we believe we will see changes in the way the economy works as these technological changes work their way through. And so that we have a group within the Bank of Canada that's studying these changes. We have we're looking at also in particular at financial technology and how it may be changing the financial system. You referred to cryptocurrencies. That's certainly one thing that we've been looking at. I mean, at this point, we see that as being something that is largely providing assets that people can speculate on, and which in some cases, though may serve other purposes of raising funding for certain companies and so on, but it's something that we're, of course, watching as part of our general mandate to safeguard the stability of the Canadian financial system. Now, the other piece of it is that we're looking, of course, at how we can incorporate technology in our own operations, and so we've recently announced something called the Project Pivot, which involves identifying certain areas where we think there might be potential to apply technology to our own activities, and inviting companies to submit proposals to partner with us in developing applications that could be relevant to our operations. And so that's something that, really serves 2 functions. It's partly the fact that it could be seriously useful and could help us do things better and help us serve Canadians better. But it could also, it also just the process of thinking about those things, I think, is really useful for us, because it helps us get our hands dirty and explain, to understand a bit more intimately how these things are working, and just to understand maybe a bit more by introspection how businesses are thinking about these things too.
If I may add to Tim's point, cryptocurrencies, it's important to note that there is a distinction between cryptocurrencies, fintech, and artificial intelligence. There are 2 very different groups. Blockchain, I'm still learning what that is.
You mentioned 3 points.
Sorry?
You mentioned 3 points. You said there's cryptocurrencies. So
Well, like cryptocurrency would sort of fall under like the financial technology spectrum, and then we've got like artificial intelligence, natural language processing, all of those. Like artificial intelligence is an umbrella term for other types of like machine learning. But in any case, like financial technology, the fintech sector is actually regulated. Artificial intelligence in Canada is not regulated, and that's a really big concern because we're having all of these great conversations, but we don't really have policy in place to help govern how Canadians are able to operate. So that's just to add to Tim's point. Tim, can I call you Tim?
Sure.
Tim, okay. Because I know sometimes like
Tim, I wasn't trying to beat up on you, but I was only asking because you're the guy who we all go to for direction, right? So I was only asking.
Okay, no.
So yeah, so we've got like Canadian regulations, but there's also international regulations for that. That's just something to add.
I would just add, as an AI producing organization, we actually believe in regulation, and we're at the table with non-government organizations and standards organizations that that are working towards a national and international standard because it's the right thing to do.
So I apologize for all those that had their hands up in advance and were going to ask questions, but we've run out of time. We've had a great discussion. I really like augmented reality. I really like empathy being introduced to the discussion. The great context, and really appreciate all your tremendous expertise and insight. So thank you, and round of applause.
So I am Lynn Hamilton. I am the president of the Internet Society Canada chapter. Thank you so much for coming to our inaugural Toronto event. If you would like to take part in more fantastic conversations that we have like now, please consider joining a member. You can come, becoming a member, you can come to me. I will size you for your skull ring. I will, right? Introduce some of the numerous hazing activities that we get involved in. No, please come, become a member of our little merry band. We are 200 sort of thought leaders across Canada, really interesting, having these kinds of big discussions, hard discussions, right? Like, this is not easy stuff. We're not going to fix it today, but the more we talk about it, the more we know. I mean, everybody gets a little bit smarter. That's why I'm here. So please, if you haven't had your question answered, please take it up at the bar for the next little while, and all of our panelists will be here, and you can very informally have it. So please, thank you very much. And thank you, Jeremy, for moderating.